This is Leafe Christian. I'm a sociocracy trainer. I specialize in teaching intentional communities and other kinds of member-led groups. It's not that I'm all about sociocracy, although I am. It's that I'm all about intentional communities, and I want them to succeed and thrive, and I want them to have really effective, powerful, wonderful self-governance and decision-making. So for that reason, I teach sociocracy, because it tends to work better when we meet what I now know to call the 4 necessary requirements. It tends to work very well. So that's what this is about. So let's get started. The way I see it, excuse me, this is the first slide right here. The way I see it, there are these 4 necessary requirements for sociocracy to work well, as compared to having dreadful challenges and conflict in community. So the 4 colors in this arrow are designed to stand for 4 necessary conditions. So I'd like to talk about the 4 kinds of benefits that I have learned and other sociocracy trainers have learned occur when an intentional community is using sociocracy well and effectively. So better meetings, getting more things done, being better organized, feeling more connected than we did before. So here are what I call the 4 requirements. First of all, everybody learns it. That is, we make sure that everybody in our community or our member-led group learns sociocracy. That might mean that when we have new people joining our member-led group or our intentional community, we need to teach it to them before we let them loose in our meetings with full and complete decision-making rights. They are there, they are observing, they are learning, but we are also teaching them. We are not, this is my hope, using sociocracy with a group of folks in a meeting, some of whom know it and some of whom do not. So everyone learns it. See this little homegrown community member agreement, relearning sociocracy? I made this up. It says, I'll say my name, Leafe Christian, will learn sociocracy as soon as I conveniently can in the community called Happy Valley, say. In the meantime, I won't try to make our community revert to using consensus in meetings or voting. For example, I typed this all wrong. Well, bad grammar, I hope it gives you a laugh. I won't try to induce the facilitator to call on me whenever I raise my hand. Me. Or to try to force the meeting to have an open discussion unless I, in the moment, propose an open discussion for a certain specific period of time and everyone consents to my process proposal. Signed, Leafe Christian. And somebody in the community would sign it in my ideal world. And then I'd get a copy and they'd get a copy. If we did something like this, and I didn't want to learn it because, harumph, I joined this community because I thought we use consensus, and now that everybody switched to this sociology, socio whatever it is, I don't want to learn it. I'm not taking the darn workshop. I'm not going to learn it. Supposing I have that attitude. Has this ever happened in community in this universe? Why, yes, it has. And so if I don't want to learn it, or I just couldn't go to the workshop because I had something to do, or for some reason I haven't learned it yet, or I'm a new member, well, I just might sign this agreement. But let's say that I won't sign the agreement because sometimes people in communities don't want to do things like that. Has that ever happened? Well, then what I would do is show it to them and say, would you read this, Diana? And then I would read it and go, I'm not signing this, but I would at least know what the community would like me to do. Now, let's say that I said, listen, I'm not signing it and I'm not reading it. And so let's say that the person welcoming me to the community, Jack, says to me, okay, well, then I'm going to read it to you. Okay. And then he reads it to me. And now at least I know what the community would like of me. Well, it's better than nothing. Hey, is this agreement binding? Is it binding in a court of law? Is it a contract that, we go sue each other over? Of course not. It's a simple little community process that can help people understand what we want of them in community. It's a suggestion. It's not at all part of sociocracy officially. It's just something I made up because I wanted to help communities be happy and successful and thriving and not run into the dreadful things which you will soon learn about that can happen when everyone hasn't learned it. So that's the first one. Everyone learns it. Okay, here we go. use all 7 parts. Wait a minute, are there 7 parts? No, that's just how I slice the pie of the aspects of sociocracy. The way I do it to make it easy to learn and easy to remember is there's the circle structure, there's putting feedback, questions, and proposals. There's the meeting processes that we do in circle meetings, which I call policy meetings: consent decision making, proposal forming, selecting people for roles, role improvement feedback, and consenting to circle members. Did I say that? Anyway, you can read what it says here on this little chart. What I made this little bicycle for is because the way I see it and the way I've experienced it, these 7 parts mutually reinforce each other. They make each work better. If you had only 6 or only 5, it wouldn't work so well. So let's take this bicycle. We can still ride it if we don't have a seat. We can still ride it if we don't have pedals. We could just push our foot along the floor, the ground. We can still ride it if we don't have brakes, because we can put our foot like that. We could still ride it if we don't have handlebars. We could reach down and grab the front fender and turn the wheel. Very awkward. The bike might fall over. We might not get very far very fast. We certainly can't ride that bike without a frame or the front or back wheel. I think that's quite analogous to sociocracy. You need to have all the parts because they're designed to go together. Is there anything else that's designed that way? Oh, here's just a better picture to give it to you bigger so you could see these 7 parts the way I slice the pie. Other sociocracy trainers don't usually say 7 parts, but when they're training people in sociocracy, these are all the things that people learn. Oops, here we go. Okay, see this physiological construction designed by the universe or the creator, or however you put it? Boy, we need all the parts. They mutually reinforce each other. They help each other work. If we removed one of them, we might not continue on, but if we move some of them, we do continue on, but not as well. So we need all the parts. That's just the analogy I want to make. So that's my second suggested of all of the 4 necessary requirements. Use all 7 parts. Please use it as your sociocracy trainer teaches you. Please do not try to turn it into a combination or a hybrid with what you have used before, like some form of voting or some form of consensus. Please don't mix it and mash it together with something else, because if you do, there tends to be dreadful conflict. And then you wonder, what the heck is wrong with this socio thing? It's not working. Well, of course it's not working. It's like one transportation method is a bicycle and another one is a donkey, and you can't have a donkey cycle. It doesn't really work. So you need to either ride the donkey or ride the bike. Either one of them works better than trying to make a hybrid animal wheeled vehicle. So see this fox who stands for the very wise sociocracy trainer? Use it like I show you. Okay, that's designed to give you the sense that please use it for at least 18 months to 2 years, like your trainer taught you, and don't combine it with anything. If you'd like to change it, I think that by the end of 18 months or 2 years, you'll have the principles of sociocracy in your blood and bones and cells. You'll understand it so well that you won't violate any of the principles of, I say you, but I mean, you know, the people that you're training. You won't violate any of the principles of having circles and double links and using the elections process, which I call selecting people for roles, and getting consent before you do anything. And the last one is please get periodic review trainings or consultations in person, on Skype or Zoom, on the phone, on email. The idea is if you run into a problem, well, ask your trainer. Get help immediately. Don't try to guess. Don't try to figure it out. Like, well, I think we should do sociocracy like this. Well, I think we should do sociocracy like that, like this, like that. Wars, sociocracy wars. You're about to see an example of sociocracy wars. It's awful. Reviewing how sociocracy works, getting reminded. I've done several sociocracy review trainings for intentional communities. 3 worked very, very well, and they are thriving. Some of my sociocracy trainer colleagues have done the same with good results. I have done it with 2 communities. You're going to hear their stories, where it was too little, too late, and I couldn't help them at all. And it was so heartbreaking for me and frustrating for them. So please do get review trainings. This is to prevent what I call the dread governance drift. See those continents drifting all around the earth? Well, I don't want your community or the community that you're helping have their beautifully created, well-learned, effective sociocracy process start to shift and drift across the ocean and become once again what you did before, or some kind of dreadful hybrid with the voting method or the consensus method that was used before. Please do not let that happen. Okay, here they are again. Everyone learns it. Use all 7 parts. Use it as your trainer teaches you, and get periodic review trainings or consultations. Okay, now I want to tell you a story. I call this story Sociocracy Wars at Cypress Grove Cohousing. I'm so sorry I can't show you pictures. It would be rude to show these folks, wouldn't it? It would out them, and I don't want you to know who they are. So I'm going to ask you to take a look at these crashing goats, and I'll tell you the story. It'll take about 6 minutes to tell you. The founders of Cypress Grove Cohousing began using sociocracy early in their history, in their development and financing phases. At first, all went well. But the founders didn't train the new people who had just joined them because they thought, oh, they'll just pick it up by being in the meetings. But this doesn't work. People need training. So by the time 3 years later, when they'd finished their construction and everybody moved in, only about 20% of the people who moved in were in the original group who had the training. So they had a whole bunch of people who had no idea how to use sociocracy or what it was or what is this thing. And so only 20% of them had ever studied it. And so those founders from the original group who got trained served as the facilitators, and they tried to convey how it worked, but they didn't have any actual trainings. So it didn't really work out too well. The 80% of the people who had not studied it, really had never trained in it, tended to view sociocracy through the lens of the consensus decision-making process, which is the process that they knew best, the one that they had used before in various groups they'd been in. So it seemed inevitable that they would have governance drift. They drifted away from what they originally learned and just agreed to use, and they did have it. Their meetings gradually shifted into a confusing combination of semi-sociocracy, pseudo-consensus. It was awful. People insisted on speaking whenever they raised their hands, rather than waiting to be called on in rounds around the circle. The facilitators didn't know what to do. I wish they had, but they would just call on people because they didn't want them to be glaring and scowling at them and yelling at them for not calling on them. So they just called on them, and it was chaotic. Another thing they did not do is they did not build any feedback questions into their proposals in order to find out how later they would measure and evaluate those proposals. So they were never included. So this meant, first of all, they never evaluated their proposals. And secondly, and more subtly, but very important, there was no simple, easy way to resolve an objection in a circle to a proposal by saying, well, if you're concerned that's going to happen, let's create one or more feedback questions to address that. Is this thing starting to happen? And so on. If we did that, would this proposal be safe enough to try? Good enough for now? So they didn't do that. They didn't know about that. And here's another thing they did. Anybody could go to any circles meeting anytime. Not only did they have a lot of people in the meetings that weren't circle members, these visitors insisted they had the right to speak. They insisted they had the right to put agenda items on the agenda of that circle and to talk a lot and pretty much derail the meeting that the circle members had wanted to have. Does this make you feel frustrated and sad? It does me. So basically, they didn't understand the principle of consent. So some of their members who understood sociocracy well because they were reading about it and they were going online and they asked the founders to teach them, they had ideas about how it should be, which is what I think too. But there were other people there, newer people, who wanted to create sociocracy the way they wanted to. So they thought, no, it's not like that, it's like this. It's not like that, it's like this. So there were these people saying, sociocracy is like this. See, it says here in the book. See, it says here in this article online. See, it says here in this magazine article that Diana wrote in Communities Magazine. See, it says here this way. These other people, multiple different ones, said, no, it's like this, no, it's like this, no, it's like this. So I call that the Sociocracy Wars of Cypress Grove cohousing. I thought they needed a review workshop. Wouldn't you think so? But they didn't want one because they knew that they already knew what they were doing. And they were a community, they were smart people, they knew what they were doing. They didn't want no darn outside trainer coming in. So one of their founders paid me to do it because he thought, we sure do need this, let's get her here. So I came, I did the review workshop and it didn't work at all. Here's what happened. When I presented basic sociocracy concepts and attempted to clarify misunderstandings of it, this confirmed what this group of people who had studied it had been saying in the Sociocracy Wars. So they were glad, but they weren't glad for too long because the other people were furious with me. With me? Yeah, with me. They said, you're taking their side. Excuse me for yelling into the microphone. Well, I said, look, there aren't any sides, but they didn't believe me. And I went home and they were unhappy and I was sad. But the story doesn't end there. A little while later, a relatively new member to their community who had not taken the review workshop and had never studied sociocracy was selected to be the operations leader of their general circle, which kind of means the operations leader of the whole place, the way they ran their community. So he knew top-down hierarchical management from the business model, and that's what he was doing. Also, there was this big controversy in the community about whether the operations leader should run the meeting and run the functions of any operations meeting and be the boss of any work tasks and operations. And some people said, oh no, the circle gets to choose how they make decisions in an operations meeting, which is true. And so some of the people said, well, look, here on this page of the book, We the People by John Buck and Sharon DeLines, it says, you can decide it yourselves, people that are in the circle. And over here, many pages later, it says, the operations leader decides autocratically. So they said to me on email, which is it? And I said, it's the former, but let me ask John Buck. He wrote me an email that said, oh, this isn't a contradiction. These are just two different options. I sent them the email. They didn't believe me. I mean, most of them believed me, but the operations leader of the general circle, the new guy who was a business top-down guy, said, no, I don't believe it because this part here is later in the book. So that's what the authors really meant. So I'm going to be the boss of everything. He also had the dreadfully mistaken idea that if it isn't a proposal, it's operations, and he would run that, whatever it was, whoever circle, he would manage it. So I, naively believing I could help, I said, listen, I emailed him and the other people, I'd be happy to do a series of one-on-one conversations with you on Skype to share with you about sociocracy because you weren't able to get the original training. So would you like to do that? I mean, you know, for free. Because I was kind of like heartbroken about this community. I had friends there and it was just hard to think about them. And he wrote me back on the email, no thanks, I'm really busy. Besides, it's not needed, I already understand sociocracy. Thanks very much. So let's take a look at what they didn't do. They hadn't, everyone hadn't learned it. They weren't using some of the parts. They weren't using it as their original teacher taught them, and only 20% of them had ever been to that workshop, and that was 3 years before. And they completely didn't do any learning or changing anything after my review workshop. Okay, let's look at the story of Sequoia Glen Cooperative. So give me a sec here. I call this one Sociocracy Gets a Black Eye at Sequoia Glen. This was a series of this was three different communities that were all cooperative that had created a network of all three communities because they were all in the same close geographical location. And I was told by their original sociocracy trainer, oh yeah, they use sociocracy there at Sequoia Glen. And they wanted a review training when I was in their area. It was actually just an afternoon. So I believed the original trainer, who was a friend of mine, who said, yeah, they use sociocracy. And I thought, oh, great. So I go to this review afternoon short training where there were very, very few people. And these very few people were real interested in what I might share. And I didn't know why there were so few. And there was a whole lot of people in that network of 3 co-ops, but still. And I proceeded on the assumption that each thing that I was describing or referring to, they knew what it was and they were using it. Boy, was I wrong. I went home. Later on, I got an email and we did a series of Skype calls with the operations leader of their general circle, a man that I'll call Sam. He was the president of their network of 3 co-op communities. He told me about a burning issue they'd had. They had leased a building nearby to serve as a shared dining room and kitchen facility for the whole group. It was on some land adjacent, but it was overrun by mice. And they got the idea that they would get 2 cats to live there. They'd have people feed the cats and make sure the cats had everything they need, water, everything they needed, and the cats would get rid of the mice. Well, various people there did not want to do that. 2 of them disliked cats intensely and didn't want to have to go to a dining room where a cat was or had been. 1 was actually allergic to cats. So they created what they thought was the sociocratic method of creating a proposal that would put into the proposal that we will check back later on the cats and we'll make it good enough for now, safe enough to try consent to this proposal and check back later. But here's what happened. After 6 months, they took a look at the decision and they had a huge fight because the wording they had in the proposal was, in 6 months, we'll see if we can live with it. That's too vague. It doesn't have any specificity about what should have happened or not. The mice were gone, the cats were fat and happy. 3 members who didn't want it before still didn't. 2 of them didn't want cats. They don't like cats. And 1 of them was allergic to cats. They could not come to a decision. And each side in this conflict were using what Sam told me were bullying and shaming tactics to try to stop the others from either having cats or not having cats. So what they did was they decided not to have cats because they couldn't resolve this. 3 people were very happy and all the rest of them were miserable because now they knew they'd have mice again, and they did. So then I learned that only a small group of the homeowners of these 3 co-op communities ever even attended any meetings. And then I learned that the rest of them would come only when there was an agenda item that they were interested in, like the mice and cats situation. Then I learned that the few people who attended most of the meetings were the few people who had originally taken that workshop from my sociocracy trainer friends some years before, and that all the rest of them had not been trained. Like, again, maybe like 80, 85, 90%. Oh my God, no wonder. And so then I found out that when Sam and a handful of people had taken my friend, the sociocracy trainer's training, they got all enthusiastic and they went back to the meeting of Sequoia Glen co-op of the 3 communities, and they proposed to themselves that they would adopt sociocracy and use it, and they consented to the proposal, and then they started using it. Do you see the problem? They were preaching to the choir. They were the only ones in the meeting. All the rest of the people hadn't come, and all the people who hadn't come, who didn't know what sociocracy was, didn't have an opportunity to say whether they wanted it or not, and they didn't know what it was anyway. Well, that was a bad problem. Well, things went from bad to worse. I suggested to Sam, because I still thought they had all learned sociocracy when I suggested this. I said, well, why don't you just try again? This time, give it another 6 months, propose that you try it again, make real specific ways of measuring and evaluating whether the cats are doing their job and people can live with it. Try again. I thought that was a good idea, but it wasn't. So he said, okay, they tried it again. He emailed me again later and said, we've had nothing but horrible conflict the whole time since we tried it again. He told me all about the horrible conflict and the fights and how everybody was miserable and upset. There was so much conflict that everybody hated sociocracy and they weren't going to use it anymore and they threw it out. Why did they throw it out? Well, because clearly it doesn't work. Then he told me, you know, you really caused us a problem. We had a whole lot of conflict, way more than we needed to because of what you said. Like, try it again. And this time do it like this. Well, I thought, actually, my big mistake was not in suggesting that. My big mistake was in assuming that when I was told, yeah, I taught them sociocracy in a workshop and now they use it, that meant they understood it, they all understood it, they all decided to use it, and they all were using it and using it correctly and using all parts. So that didn't work at all. So let's take a look now. Once again, what didn't work? Everyone had not learned it at Sequoia Glen. They used only some of its parts. They didn't use it as their original trainer taught them, or as I tried to bring up later. And they did get one half-day periodic training with me, but was only a few people, not the people who really needed to know it. So now what I'd like to do is show you an example of some communities that actually have been doing this really well. They've been succeeding and thriving, and it's because they meet the conditions. So here's Columbia Eco-Village in Portland, Oregon. It's a co-housing community, which is also an eco-village in the middle of a big city. That's their site plan. It's apartment buildings that got converted to co-housing in an eco-village, and a farmhouse, that's at the top of the map, which is the original building on the first of two properties. These folks are very much into organic gardening and urban farming, a wonderful community. I love these folks. I've been there a couple of times and did a review workshop, and so did one of my Sociocracy trainer colleagues. So here's one of the things they have said. This is Pam Leitch. She's the lady in the pink. Our social circle, which is one of their main functional circles that has to do with governance and membership and everything to do with people. Our social circle functions better now than it ever has in the 11 years since our founding. It's because with Sociocracy, we can now set limits. And they do. The limits they set, among other things, are they choose who is in their circles through the consenting to circle members process. They give people in their circles role improvement feedback. They have a rule called the 2-minute rule that if you're a visitor and you come to a circle, you get to talk for 2 minutes, and they set their cell phone timers, click, 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 click. And after the 2 minutes, you need to stop and you can't interrupt their meeting for the rest of the time because you had your say and the circle members heard you, and then they're going to conduct the business and you can observe. This has changed their life for the better. Let's look at Baja Biosana Eco Village in Baja, California. It's in a tropical desert. Their values and practices include being vegans with a wonderful organic diet and natural building, and being based on permaculture principles. As I was getting to know the community, I realized that using Sociocracy means people work to create a supportive, non-judgmental, honorable atmosphere. I thought, that's amazing, I'm in. So she joined. And her husband, who joined earlier, had said, I would never have joined the community if we didn't use Sociocracy. It's our saving grace. Here's Pioneer Valley Co-Housing in Massachusetts, home of Ted and Jerry of the SOFA training. Some pictures of this beautiful co-housing community. We've made more decisions in the past 2 months than we have in the past 2 years. That was 2 months after they started trying it for their 18-month period of trying it. People are happier and more satisfied and getting more things done. It's very clear what I commit to do, and it's very clear what the consequences are if I don't. I'd like you to see the wonderful 3-minute video, which if you type into the YouTube box, Dynamic Governance for Intentional Communities, you'll get it. It's only 3 minutes. It shows these and other people saying why they like using Sociocracy at Pioneer Valley Co-Housing. Aldea Feliz is an eco-village in Colombia, not Columbia Eco-Village, but in Colombia. not too far from Bogota. It's a tropical mountain setting. That's me in the lower right, hanging out with one of their members in a bunch of vines. It was a tropical paradise. I was in heaven. That's them in the upper right, using consent decision making, and in the lower left, doing the Sociocracy elections process, which I call selecting people for roles. Information flows better, and we have better follow-up to our decisions. Our meetings are faster and lighter and have a rhythm that feels satisfying. And at the end of our last meeting, we started dancing for joy. And there they are, dancing for joy. I cannot promise that your community will dance for joy because you probably don't live in Latin America, but if you do, you might dance for joy. Okay. Rocky Corner Cohousing in Connecticut. They are building, they are meeting, they're gardening, they're having fun. I personally place so much value on Sociocracy that I have become critical of every other organization in my life. The redundancy of tasks where I work is horrendous. My church meetings make me cringe. The annual meetings of my small New England town fall far short. Where is the equivalence of voice, the power of many minds coming together to find a solution to a problem? I want every organization in the world to use Sociocracy. Harts Mill Eco-Village in North Carolina, our last community. They're a forming community. There they are breaking ground. That's their site plan. When new people learn the steps of our Sociocracy process and learn how to do rounds, they feel amazed at how much we can get done. They feel confident that when they come to a meeting, it will be productive. So they don't mind coming to the meetings, lots of them. Because our meetings just rock. Recently, we had a huge amount of business to conduct in one large group meeting that lasted for 3 hours. We moved through it easily, spending no more than about 10 minutes on each issue. It took a lot of preparation and training to accomplish this, but there's a group coherence around Sociocracy now, and people tend to have more energy after a meeting than before. Ladies and gents, have you ever heard this in your life? Well, you have, if you're working with Sociocracy effectively, which is that you have more energy after the meeting than before. And here's my favorite quote of all time from Harts Mill Eco-Village. A visitor said she'd never seen a community meeting be so effective, efficient, and fun. Once again, here they are. Everyone learns it. Use all parts. Do it as your teacher trains you. Get periodic review trainings. And here are what I consider the 4 benefits, which you've just heard from these 5 communities. Better meetings, getting more done, being better organized, and feeling more connected. So now I want to show you something that's kind of a bonus and a little bit of dessert, which is this.
When we use Sociocracy, it feels hard at first, but eventually our meetings do go quicker and we're getting more stuff done. And the best thing of all is we're having much more fun. Sociocracy worked for me.
Okay, that's everything about what I wanted to share with you about the 4 necessary conditions. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.